Across thousands of years and the vast web of human cultures, one symbol has slithered persistently through myth, religion, and psyche: the serpent. It appears not only as an animal, but as a profound archetype, a vessel of meanings, often conflicting, yet always potent. From the temples of ancient Mesopotamia to the dreamscapes of modern psychology, the serpent reemerges again and again, refusing to be silenced or tamed. It is a creature both feared and revered, hidden in shadows yet glimmering with sacred insight. The serpent defies singular interpretation. It is a symbol of contradiction, a living paradox. On one hand, it kills with venom, shedding its skin like death, crawling close to the dust. On the other, it heals, renews, transforms. Its poison becomes medicine. Its death-like stillness precedes rebirth. In this duality, the serpent mirrors existence itself, creation and destruction intertwined, wisdom and deception coiled together. It is no wonder that so many traditions have elevated the serpent beyond biology, into the realm of the divine and the damned. But the serpent does not only embody opposites, it transcends them. In its silent, sinuous movement, it suggests a deeper knowledge, one that slips past dogma and dares to peer behind the veil. Serpents have guarded temples and cosmic gates, whispered truths in gardens, and guided mystics through the darkness of unknowing. To follow the path of the serpent is not simply to worship it, but to recognize its presence in the very structure of transformation: psychological, spiritual, alchemical. The serpent is not content with binaries. It demands synthesis. It is this liminal quality that makes the serpent a symbol of gnosis, of hidden or forbidden knowledge. In many traditions, the serpent is the one who speaks what should not be spoken, who tempts with the truth, who opens the eyes rather than keeps them closed. This is not always a welcome gift. For those who cling to innocence, comfort, or orthodoxy, the serpent becomes a deceiver. But for the initiate, for the one who chooses to see, the serpent is a teacher, a guide, a revealer of what lies beneath appearances. It slithers along the edge of what is acceptable, always half-shrouded, never wholly divine, never wholly demonic. And this ambiguity, this refusal to be pinned down, is precisely what gives it power. It moves through systems of belief without belonging to any one of them. It takes on new forms, new names, yet always leaves behind the same chill of recognition. The serpent is older than any single myth. It coils at the root of language, of symbol, of thought itself. It is not just a character in stories, it is the story beneath the stories, the force of transformation hidden within all things. In the chapters that follow, we will trace the serpent's path through history, from the caves of prehistory to the depths of esoteric thought. We will see how it has been honored as a god, cursed as a demon, studied as an inner power, and understood as a mirror of the human soul. Not to tame it, but to walk beside it, and perhaps, in doing so, learn how to shed our own skin. Long before the serpent slithered into organized religion or philosophical discourse, it coiled itself into the imaginations of our prehistoric ancestors. In the flickering firelight of ancient caves, etched into stone walls or carved into figurines, the snake appears not as a monster to be slain, but as something deeply revered, an embodiment of fertility, life force, and the mysteries of the earth. These earliest depictions weren't decorative. They were sacred, symbolic, tied to the primal forces that governed survival and death, growth and decay. Across continents and across time, serpent imagery surfaces in strikingly similar forms. In Neolithic fertility idols, serpents curl around pregnant figures, suggesting not only biological fertility, but the regenerative power of the earth itself. In megalithic tombs, spiral engravings, often interpreted as stylized snakes, wind their way around stones associated with the underworld and seasonal rebirth. There is an unmistakable association between the snake and cycles, the planting and harvesting of crops, the rising and setting of the sun, the life-death rebirth journey of human beings. These early peoples may not have had writing, but they read the earth. And the snake was a living line between worlds, above and below, seen and unseen. The snake's ability to shed its skin made it a walking metaphor for renewal. To see a snake sloughing off its former body was to witness something magical. The illusion of death, followed by a strange reemergence. It seemed to speak to the possibility of life after loss, of healing after injury, of time folding in on itself like scales. And so, the snake began to symbolize eternity, not as a linear progression, but as a sacred loop. This idea eventually evolved into the image of the ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail, an ancient emblem of cyclical time. The ouroboros wasn't just a symbol, it was a worldview. To the ancient mind, time was not a straight line with a beginning and end. It was circular. It turned like the seasons, like the moon, like the rhythms of birth and death. The serpent, both bound to the earth and capable of sudden, violent movement, embodied the pulse of this circular reality. It had no limbs, no expression, no sound. It slithered silently, like time itself, and its stillness could be as terrifying as its strike. And yet, the fear it inspired wasn't the kind of fear reserved for monsters. It was a sacred fear. Awe. The serpent was not evil in these early contexts. It was powerful. It could take life, but it also held the key to life. It could dwell in darkness, yet bring forth light. These were not moral judgments, but elemental truths. Nature did not distinguish between creation and destruction. It held both. The serpent, then, was a symbol of that totality, of nature not yet divided by doctrine, by ethics, or by dualistic thinking. It's no accident that the earliest human symbols are serpentine. The snake, in shedding its skin and moving with no feet, seemed to hover just beyond the boundaries of the known. It was not merely an animal. It was a sign, a warning, a promise, an ancient whisper that something more existed beneath the surface of things, and that this more was not tame. It was sacred. It was terrifying. And it was waiting. In these primal echoes, we see the roots of every serpent myth to come. Not in fear, not in sin, but in reverence. Before it became a devil or a god, the serpent was simply there, in the earth, in the cycles, in the bones of the world. And humanity, sensing its strange wisdom, chose to listen. In ancient Egypt, the serpent was not banished to the shadows or cast as an enemy of the divine. It was enthroned, elevated to a position of immense spiritual and political significance. Serpents guarded temples, protected kings, and slithered across the boundaries of life and death. They were not merely symbols of danger, but emblems of royal authority, cosmic order, and sacred power. Within Egyptian cosmology, the serpent was a liminal force, one that existed at the crossroads of chaos and control, a divine energy that could either uphold or unravel the world. One of the most prominent serpent figures in Egyptian religion was Wadjet, the cobra goddess. She was not just any cobra. She was the cobra, the protector of Lower Egypt, and one of the oldest deities in the Egyptian pantheon. Wadjet's presence adorned the very crowns of the pharaohs. Her image, The upright rearing cobra, known as the uraeus, was more than decorative. It was a living symbol of divine authority, believed to emit destructive fire against enemies and shield the king from harm. This was not a passive icon. It was active, living, a force of protection so fierce it demanded reverence. The uraeus carried deep metaphysical implications. Coiled at the forehead of the pharaoh, it echoed the imagery later associated with the concept of Kundalini in India, a serpent-like spiritual energy rising through the spine, awakening consciousness. Though Egyptian theology never systematized energy centers as the chakras would in Hinduism, the placement of wadjet on the brow suggests an intuitive understanding of the serpent as a channel of divine insight and supernatural empowerment. The pharaoh was not merely a ruler, he was a conduit. The serpent made visible the divine right to rule, coiling wisdom, protection, and deadly force into a single sacred emblem. But Egyptian serpent symbolism wasn't limited to guardianship. There was also Apep, or Apophis, the great chaos serpent. In myth, Apep was the eternal enemy of the sun god Ra, lying in wait each night to attack the solar bark as it journeyed through the underworld. This wasn't a one-time cosmic battle. It was cyclical, a nightly confrontation that mirrored the endless tension between order and chaos. Apep was not merely evil in a moral sense. He represented the ever-present threat of dissolution, the raw, primal force that constantly threatened the harmony of the cosmos. Ra's nightly battle with Apep was more than a myth. It was a ritual reenacted in temple ceremonies and protective spells, reminding the people that cosmic balance had to be actively maintained. And here, the serpent served as both guardian and adversary, a dual role that was never fully resolved. Even as priests sought to magically bind or destroy Apep through ritual, the existence of the chaos serpent was acknowledged as necessary. Without chaos, there could be no order. Without night, no day. Without the threat of destruction, the triumph of life meant nothing. This dialectic, serpent as protector and destroyer, was central to Egyptian spirituality. The same creature that crowned the pharaoh with divine legitimacy could also rise up in the underworld and attempt to devour the sun. The serpent was not one thing. It was all things. Life, death, protection, threat, wisdom, terror. And it was sacred in all its forms. Even in death rituals, serpents played a role. In the Book of the Dead, various serpentine beings appear as both obstacles and helpers for the soul navigating the afterlife. Some are monstrous, others beneficent, but all are potent, expressions of the hidden forces that animate the cosmos. The serpent is never simply symbolic in Egypt. It is alive in the imagination, charged with metaphysical electricity, always coiled and ready. In this light, the serpent in Egyptian thought is not to be interpreted simplistically. It is not evil, nor is it purely good. It is power, pure power. Coiled within every pharaoh's crown, lurking in the shadowy depths of the Duat, wrapping itself around the hidden architecture of the universe. To the Egyptians, understanding the serpent was not an intellectual exercise. It was a necessity for survival, for sovereignty, and for the soul's journey beyond the veil. In the spiritual traditions of India, the serpent takes on a role unlike anywhere else in the ancient world. Here, it is not only a symbol of cosmic power or sacred wisdom, it becomes an inner reality, a coiled force sleeping within the human body itself. The serpent is not just something outside to fear or worship. It is within you. It is you, in potential. In Hinduism, this serpent is Kundalini, the latent spiritual energy said to rest at the base of the spine, coiled like a snake, waiting to be awakened. The awakening of Kundalini is not metaphorical. In yogic systems, it is an experience, often described as a surge of electricity, a rising heat, a spiraling current of consciousness. As Kundalini ascends through the chakras, or subtle energy centers, the individual undergoes radical transformation. It is not just about enlightenment. It is about disintegration and reconstruction, death of the ego, rebirth of the self. This process is dangerous, intense, and sacred. The serpent in this context is not a passive symbol. It is the very mechanism of spiritual evolution. But the serpent's presence in Hinduism does not end with Kundalini. It is also personified in the nagas, semi-divine serpent beings who dwell in subterranean realms, rivers, and hidden places. They are both feared and revered, associated with fertility, rain, and the guarding of treasure. Not merely material riches, but spiritual ones. Nagas protect sacred knowledge. They are neither wholly divine nor demonic, but liminal beings, creatures of threshold and depth. In myth, they often appear during moments of transition or revelation. They are guardians of the mysteries, and sometimes their teachers. In the great mythic narrative of the Samudra Manthan, or churning of the ocean, the serpent Vasuki is used as the cosmic rope coiled around Mount Mandara. Gods and demons tug on either side, using Vasuki to churn the primal ocean and extract the nectar of immortality. The image is staggering. The serpent as the axis of transformation, the very mechanism by which the elixir of the gods is drawn from chaos. Vasuki suffers in the process, even releases poison, but this sacrifice is necessary. Once again, the serpent is both medicine and venom, a being through which transformation is made possible. Vasuki also appears around the neck of Shiva, the great ascetic god, who wears him like a garland. Shiva, who sits in meditation at the edge of the world, is the perfect embodiment of what the serpent represents: stillness and power, destruction and regeneration, death and transcendence. The serpent on Shiva's body is not an accessory. It is an extension of his being, a living reminder of his control over primal forces. Shiva does not kill the serpent. He merges with it. He wears it. This is not conquest. It is union. Then there is Ananta Shesha, the infinite serpent upon whom Vishnu reclines in timeless sleep between the cycles of creation. Shesha's body is endless, his coils forming the foundation of the cosmos. He is not merely a servant of Vishnu, but a symbol of cosmic time, unending, cyclical, vast beyond comprehension. On his 1,000 hoods are inscribed the secrets of the Vedas, the sacred scriptures. And like the ouroboros in other traditions, Shesha wraps eternity into a shape the human mind can almost grasp. He is time, patience, endurance, the quiet, coiled waiting of infinity. Through these layered myths and practices, the serpent in Hinduism is never just an object of worship or a character in a story. It is a force that binds body and cosmos, mind and myth, form and formlessness. It is within and without. It is latent energy and cosmic structure. It is divine, but not in a removed or abstract sense. It is divine in its immediacy, in its heat, in its presence within your very spine, your breath, your becoming. There is no moral panic around the serpent in this context. It is not cast as evil or opposed to God. Instead, it is integral to divinity itself. This sets the Indian serpent apart from many of its counterparts. It is not merely an adversary or an ornament, it is a path, a teacher, a reality. The serpent is that which rises when one begins the inward journey, and that which crowns it when one reaches the end. In the biblical imagination, the serpent is perhaps the most infamous of all creatures, not because it is monstrous, but because it speaks. It does not roar or lash out. It offers a question, a challenge, a possibility. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent does not arrive as an open enemy of God, nor does it force Eve's hand. Instead, it whispers, probes, invites. Did God really say? It introduces ambiguity, the space between command and curiosity. And for this, it is branded forever as the tempter, the deceiver, the catalyst of the fall. But the serpent in Eden is not evil in the straightforward way later interpretations often suggest. It is not Satan, at least not in the original Hebrew text. It is described as arum, which means crafty or subtle, not demonic. Its words do not lie, they tell a dangerous truth. Eating the fruit does open the eyes. The knowledge of good and evil is obtained. Humanity becomes aware, conscious, no longer innocent, no longer safe. The serpent, then, acts as the agent of awakening, not the bringer of sin, but the one who shatters the illusion of simplicity. This reinterpretation of the serpent, not as villain, but as catalyst, is essential to any deeper understanding of its role in biblical tradition. It doesn't merely destroy paradise, it initiates history. Before the serpent speaks, Adam and Eve are in a state of static perfection, untouched, childlike, unconscious. Afterward, they are exiled, yes, but also transformed. They become beings who must struggle, think, choose, and create. The serpent's gift is knowledge. Dangerous, painful, irreversible, but knowledge nonetheless. Elsewhere in the Hebrew scriptures, the serpent returns in a far stranger form. During the Israelites' wanderings in the desert, a plague of venomous snakes erupts among the people. Many die. And then, in a bizarre twist, God instructs Moses to make a serpent out of bronze and lift it on a pole. Whoever looks upon this image, the very thing that brings death, is healed. This object is called the Nehushtan. It is serpent and salvation in one. Poison becomes cure. Affliction becomes remedy. The Israelites are not told to kill all the snakes or run from them. They are told to look at one, directly, without flinching. This moment is deeply alchemical. The very symbol of death becomes the instrument of life. It is a reversal, or perhaps a completion, of Eden's wound. Where the serpent once opened the eyes, now it restores the body. The gaze that brings transformation becomes sacred. And it is no accident that this image echoes down through the centuries into the modern symbol of medicine. The rod entwined by serpents, still coiled with the memory of that desert miracle. In Christian tradition, the serpent remains a paradox. It is both the symbol of temptation and, strangely, an image used to represent Christ himself. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up." Here, the crucified Christ becomes the new Nehushtan, the lifted form that heals, that absorbs death to bring life. The serpent, once cast as the enemy, now becomes a sign of redemption, not by denial, but by inversion. The fall is not undone, but redeemed. This echoes the deeper logic of Christian mysticism. What wounds can also save. What corrupts can also transmute. The serpent, once the bringer of forbidden knowledge, becomes a symbol of divine wisdom, crucified, paradoxically, in the body of the Savior. The irony is deliberate. The same species that once whispered rebellion now appears in the shadow of the cross. The fall and the resurrection are not enemies. They are stages in the same arc. The serpent was never just a villain. It was a herald of awareness, of choice, of suffering, of the need for grace. And beneath this lies an ancient current, a sense that the serpent, even in its darkest moment, holds power that cannot be fully dismissed, that there is knowledge to be gained not by avoidance, but by engagement, that what is feared must be faced. In the garden, the serpent speaks. In the wilderness, it heals. On the cross, its form is reborn. The pattern is unmistakable. The serpent does not simply mark humanity's fall from grace, it marks its journey into complexity and its first step toward redemption. Within the shadowy margins of early Christianity, beyond the orthodox councils and official creeds, there thrived a radically different understanding of the serpent, one that would have scandalized traditional interpreters. In the intricate, often suppressed worldview of the Gnostics, the serpent in Eden was not a devil in disguise. It was a liberator, a bearer of gnosis, sacred knowledge, that freed humanity from the ignorance imposed by a false god. This was not heresy for the sake of rebellion. It was a total inversion of the story, a complete rereading of the myth from the inside out. The Gnostics believed that the world as we know it was not created by the true, transcendent God, but by a lower, ignorant entity called the demiurge. This being, sometimes associated with the Old Testament creator, fashioned the material world as a prison, a distorted copy of higher realms. And in this vision, Eden was not a paradise, but a cage. Adam and Eve were not punished for sin, but for waking up. The serpent was not a deceiver, but a messenger from the true divine, one who sparked the soul's memory of its divine origin. The fruit was not a trap, but a key. This reinterpretation opens a vast, esoteric dimension to the serpent. It is no longer merely the one who tempts, it becomes the voice of Sophia, divine wisdom, who herself plays a central role in many Gnostic myths. Sophia, often personified as a feminine emanation of the divine, falls or descends into the material world, bringing with her the spark of divine consciousness. She is not evil, but tragic, fragmented, exiled, yearning for reunion with the fullness, pleroma, of God. And in some texts, it is through her that the serpent comes to humanity. The serpent is her voice, her envoy, her subtle whisper in the garden of forgetfulness. Sophia's story parallels Eve's. Both are punished for seeking knowledge. Both are blamed for the fall. Yet in the Gnostic reading, this fall is not damnation. It is the beginning of the soul's journey back toward light. Through descent comes experience. Through matter comes awareness. Through suffering comes understanding. The serpent, in this sense, is the teacher of discernment. He does not offer comfort. He offers consciousness. In Valentinian Gnosticism, one of the more theologically complex strands, Christ himself is seen as the Redeemer who completes what the serpent began. Not by condemning the act of eating the fruit, but by fulfilling its hidden promise. Christ is the serpent transformed, the Logos who brings the full gnosis that the Edenic serpent only began to awaken. This is not about good versus evil in a moral sense. It is about sleep versus awakening, ignorance versus truth, illusion versus reality. The serpent is not opposed to Christ. It foreshadows him. Even the crucifixion, a central event in Christian theology, takes on deeper, layered meaning in this framework. Just as the serpent was lifted on the pole by Moses, so too is Christ lifted on the cross. Both figures bring healing through confrontation. Both bring light through descent. The image of the crucified one becomes alchemical, the symbol of transformation through suffering. And the serpent, once thought of only as the enemy, is revealed as part of that same redemptive pattern. Gnostic texts are often obscure, their language symbolic, their meanings hidden. But this is the point. Gnosis is not given. It is discovered. The serpent, then, is not for everyone. It is for the seeker, the one willing to look beyond appearances, to question the official story, to trace the shape of the divine in the very place where others say it cannot be found. In shadow, in error, in the hiss of a creature long despised. To reclaim the serpent in Gnostic thought is to reclaim the possibility that what we fear may hold the key to what we need most. That wisdom comes not from blind obedience, but from inner revelation. That salvation is not bestowed, but remembered. And that beneath the layers of doctrine and dogma, a serpent waits still, coiled at the root of being, offering not poison, but perception. Not death, but depth. Not sin, but the first step toward soul. In Orthodox Islam, the serpent does not enjoy the same central mythic role that it does in the Abrahamic or Dharmic traditions. It appears only briefly, if at all, in the major narratives of the Quran. The story of Adam and Eve, for instance, includes no speaking snake. Instead, it is Iblis, the jinn who refuses to bow to Adam, who plays the tempter. The Quranic account strips away the serpent's voice, removing the intermediary and focusing on disobedience as a cosmic rupture between divine command and free will. But the serpent, while absent in form, is not entirely gone. It reappears quietly, subtly, in the language of Islamic esotericism, coiled in symbols, woven into metaphors, alive in the depths of the batin, the inner dimension. In the mystical tradition of Sufism, the serpent resurfaces, not as a creature of literal temptation, but as a representation of inner struggle. Here, the serpent is not external. It is within, a symbol of the nafs, the lower self, the ego-bound nature that resists annihilation in the divine. Just as the serpent in Eden catalyzed a departure from unconscious paradise, the inner serpent in Sufi psychology becomes the very force that must be transmuted through self-discipline, remembrance, and love of God. The serpent becomes the self that bites, the self that clings to illusion. But it is also, paradoxically, the self that awakens. For without the ego, there is nothing to surrender. Sufi texts often speak in layers, veiled and allegorical. In some of these writings, the serpent is tied to hidden knowledge, to the descent of divine light into the obscurity of form. It may be seen as a container of fire, raw spiritual force unrefined by wisdom. In the ecstatic poetry of mystics like Rumi or Attar, snakes slither between images of longing and annihilation, often associated with fear, danger, and the intoxication of divine love. The serpent here is not evil. It is dangerous because it is powerful, like the divine itself. Its venom can kill the false self, if one dares to drink it. There are also serpentine echoes in Islamic cosmology, particularly in esoteric commentaries on the nature of the jinn. These beings of smokeless fire are sometimes described in serpentine or dragon-like terms. In folklore and apocryphal hadiths, jinn are said to take the shape of snakes, especially black ones, and dwell in unseen places, thresholds, ruins, deserts. Some of these snakes are considered sacred or protected, especially when they are thought to house spirit beings. The Prophet Muhammad reportedly warned against killing snakes in homes without giving them a chance to leave, a recognition, perhaps, of their ambiguous status as both real animals and potential vehicles of the unseen. In certain Shia interpretations, especially among Ismaili thinkers, the serpent becomes an emblem of tawil, the practice of spiritual exegesis, of going beneath the surface of the Quran to find its hidden meanings. Just as the serpent moves along the ground, unseen and silent, so too does the seeker slide beneath the skin of the text, uncovering layers that cannot be spoken of openly. The path of the serpent is dangerous, not because it leads to heresy, but because it leads to truth. And truth, in its undiluted form, often shatters. This serpentine dimension of Islam remains largely underground. It lives in the margins, in mystical poetry, in esoteric manuscripts, in the oral traditions of folk Islam. It is rarely acknowledged in doctrine, but it is felt in practice. The fear of serpents, the awe they inspire, their presence in sacred stories told outside the canonical texts, all point to an intuitive recognition of their power. They are never wholly gone. They flicker at the edge of the map, always threatening to return. So while Islam's formal theology may not place the serpent at the center, its mystical and folkloric traditions remember. The serpent becomes a cipher, a whisper, a symbol of what lies beneath. In the soul, in the world, in the text. It represents the forces that must be confronted on the path to union with the real, al-Haq. It is a mirror, a trial, a hidden gate. And for those who seek not only to believe, but to know, it is a presence that cannot be ignored. The serpent remains, not always seen, but always felt, not named, but always near. In East Asian cultures, the serpent takes on an even more majestic and complex form, merging seamlessly with the image of the dragon, a creature that transcends the simple fear or ambivalence often associated with snakes elsewhere. Here, the serpentine becomes celestial, cosmic, and profoundly benevolent, woven into the very fabric of the natural and spiritual order. In China, Japan, and other parts of East Asia, the dragon serpent is a symbol of wisdom, power, and immortality, often viewed as a bridge between the earthly and heavenly realms. The Chinese dragon, or long, is unlike the fire-breathing monsters of Western lore. It is a long, serpentine creature, usually without wings, but imbued with the power to summon rain, control water, and shape the elements. It is deeply connected to the forces that sustain life: rivers, clouds, fertility, and the cyclical rhythms of nature. Far from being a destructive beast, the dragon is an auspicious symbol, a bringer of prosperity and harmony. It is revered not as a threat, but as a guardian and a guide. Within Taoist philosophy and practice, the dragon serpent embodies the principles of transformation and balance. Taoism sees the world as a dynamic flow of energies, the Tao or Wei, and the dragon represents the fluid, ever-changing nature of life itself. It is often associated with the alchemical process, symbolizing the transformation of base matter into spiritual gold. The dragon's serpentine form mirrors the flow of qi, life force, through the body, akin to the Kundalini serpent in Hinduism, but uniquely integrated into Taoist cosmology. The Taoist alchemist's quest for immortality frequently invokes dragon imagery. To become like the dragon is to master the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, not to escape them, but to flow with them, to transform continually without breaking. The dragon's breath is life-giving, its movements graceful yet powerful, a dance between the seen and unseen worlds. It is a mediator, a liminal figure connecting heaven and earth, the human and the divine. In Japanese culture, dragons often retain these Chinese attributes, but also take on unique local flavors. They are protectors of temples, rulers of lakes and seas, and symbols of water's cleansing and life-giving properties. The dragon's serpentine body coils through folklore as an emblem of strength and wisdom, sometimes linked to ancestral spirits and guardianship. Its image is widespread in art, festivals, and ritual, a living part of cultural identity. The East Asian dragon serpent also resonates with the idea of spiritual ascent. Its upward movement, twisting through clouds and rivers, reflects a journey not unlike the Kundalini awakening or the serpent's rise through chakras. But in these traditions, the process is deeply harmonious and integrative, emphasizing balance rather than struggle. The serpent is not a trickster or a tempter, but a guide toward wholeness and longevity. This is a profound contrast to many Western conceptions of the serpent, where the creature often embodies threat or ambivalence. In East Asia, the serpent dragon symbolizes the creative forces of nature and spirit, a living emblem of cosmic order, transformation, and the eternal dance of yin and yang. It is a creature that moves effortlessly between worlds, earth, water, sky, embodying the fluidity and interconnectedness that underpins Taoist and broader East Asian thought. In the artwork and stories, the dragon serpent's form is never static. It coils, twists, rises and falls, always in motion. Its power is not coercive but magnetic, drawing the observer into its flow. It calls us to recognize that the divine is not distant or abstract, but embodied in the very movements of life itself. In water's ripple, the wind's swirl, the pulse of the human body. Through the dragon serpent, East Asian traditions invite us into a world where transformation is natural, continuous, and ultimately sacred. In the rich spiritual landscapes of Mesoamerica and other indigenous traditions, the serpent is a powerful figure deeply entwined with the cycles of life, death, and cosmic transformation. Here, the serpent often takes on a feathered form, a striking hybrid that combines the earthbound qualities of the snake with the soaring freedom of birds. This feathered serpent is most famously embodied in the god Quetzalcoatl, a deity whose name means feathered serpent and whose influence shaped the spiritual and cultural fabric of civilizations like the Aztecs and the Maya. Quetzalcoatl is a god of wind, learning, and rebirth. Unlike the simplistic portrayals of serpents as evil or dangerous, Quetzalcoatl is a creator and a teacher, a bringer of culture, agriculture, and civilization. His serpentine form links him intimately with the earth and the underworld, while the feathers signify the sky, the heavens, and transcendence. This duality captures the fundamental tension in many serpent myths: the balance between primal, earthly forces and the aspiration toward the divine or the eternal. In the cosmology of Mesoamerican peoples, serpents were often seen as guides for shamans and visionaries traveling through the spirit world. The serpent's winding, sinuous movement mirrored the spiritual journeys that pierced through different layers of reality, from the surface world into the hidden sacred underworld. This role as a psychopomp, or guide of souls, made the serpent a central figure in initiation rites and mystical experiences. It was not simply an animal, but a mediator between worlds. Moreover, in the shamanic traditions across the Americas, serpents frequently appear in visions induced by sacred plants and substances, often used to open doors to altered states of consciousness. The serpent in these contexts is a teacher of hidden knowledge, an initiator of the mysteries that lie beyond ordinary perception. It guides the initiate through the dangers of the underworld, helps them confront their fears, and returns them transformed. This spiritual function echoes the ancient archetype of the serpent as a symbol of death and rebirth, a living metaphor for the death of the old self and the emergence of the new. The serpent's importance is not limited to high mythic figures or esoteric rites. It is deeply embedded in the everyday spiritual consciousness of indigenous peoples. Snakes are respected as beings of power and mystery, often associated with water sources, caves, and the earth itself. They embody both danger and healing, destruction and protection, embodying the forces that sustain life and challenge it simultaneously. Quetzalcoatl's legacy endures as a symbol of wisdom and transformation, transcending time and geography. He embodies the belief that knowledge, power, and renewal are intertwined, that the serpent's coil is both a prison and a promise. The feathered serpent teaches that the path to rebirth passes through the underworld of the self, that to rise, one must first descend. This theme resonates across many indigenous cultures and finds parallels in the initiation practices of countless tribal traditions around the world. In the stories and rituals of Mesoamerican peoples, the serpent's message is clear. Life is a cycle of continuous transformation, and the serpent is the eternal companion on that journey. It is a symbol of power that is both terrifying and sacred, a teacher who demands courage and wisdom. To engage with the serpent is to accept the inevitability of change, to embrace the mysteries that lie hidden beneath the surface, and to walk the delicate line between destruction and creation, darkness and light. In the Western esoteric tradition, the serpent takes on an even more layered and symbolic role, often entwined with the mysteries of initiation, alchemy, and spiritual transformation. Unlike the overtly religious contexts where the serpent is tied to specific myths or dogmas, the Western occult heritage embraces the serpent as a complex symbol of hidden knowledge and the processes of inner alchemy. It appears as a guardian, a mediator, and an initiator, an enigmatic force that marks the path toward spiritual awakening and transcendence. Hermeticism, the ancient philosophical and mystical tradition attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, treats the serpent as a sacred emblem of wisdom and transformation. Hermes himself is often depicted with the caduceus, a staff entwined by two serpents, symbolizing duality, balance, and the union of opposites. This staff represents not only healing, but the harmonious integration of opposing forces: light and darkness, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter. The serpent here is not simply a creature, but an archetype of the mysteries hidden beneath the surface of reality. It signals that the path to knowledge is guarded and secretive, accessible only to those willing to journey beyond the obvious. Alchemy, perhaps the most famous of Western esoteric disciplines, elevates the serpent to a central role in its symbolic language. The serpent, often depicted as a dragon or ouroboros, the serpent biting its own tail, becomes the prima materia, the fundamental substance from which the philosopher's stone, or ultimate spiritual and material perfection, is derived. This image captures the endless cycle of destruction and creation, dissolution and coagulation, death and rebirth that define the alchemical process. The ouroboros, more than just a symbol of eternity, embodies the principle of transformation itself. The serpent consumes itself, dies, and is reborn in an endless loop, illustrating the cyclical nature of spiritual development. The alchemist must embrace this paradox. The self must be broken down to be remade, poison turned into medicine, chaos into order. The serpent's coil is the spiral staircase leading upward, each revolution a deeper level of initiation, each bite a moment of dissolution necessary for rebirth. Within the occult tradition, the serpent is also linked to Saturn, the planet and god associated with time, limitation, and death, but also with patience, structure, and the mastery of form. Saturn's influence is harsh, yet essential, teaching through restriction and challenge. The serpent's role in occult symbolism echoes this. It is a force of transmutation that strips away illusion, confronts the initiate with shadow, and ultimately leads to liberation. It is at once feared and revered, a threshold guardian of the inner mysteries. The serpent also appears in the mystical systems of Kabbalah, where it is connected to the tree of life and the flow of divine energy through the Sephirot. Here, the serpent's movement reflects the dynamic processes of creation and destruction, ascent and descent. It can symbolize the Kundalini-like awakening of spiritual energy, as well as the necessary descent into material reality. In Kabbalistic thought, as in other esoteric paths, the serpent is never simply evil. It is a complex emblem of the tension between the hidden and the revealed, the infinite and the finite. In Western occultism, the serpent is thus reclaimed from simplistic moral binaries. It becomes the emblem of initiation, the challenge one must face to cross from ignorance into knowledge, from death into life. It is the dark guide who tests the seeker, the living symbol of the alchemical marriage of opposites, the key to unlocking the mysteries hidden within nature and the self. Through ritual, meditation, and symbolic study, practitioners are invited to encounter the serpent not as an external threat, but as an inner presence, the primal energy that must be integrated, understood, and transformed. The serpent guards the threshold, and only those willing to face their own darkness and limitations can pass through into the light beyond. In this tradition, the serpent's power is paradoxical. It is poison and cure, death and rebirth, destroyer and creator. It embodies the deep truth that transformation is never comfortable or easy, but is the essential path to spiritual awakening. The serpent is not the enemy to be slain, but the mystery to be embraced, the eternal symbol of the alchemical journey inward. In the realm of modern psychology, the serpent emerges not merely as a mythic figure, but as a profound archetype embedded deep within the human unconscious. Carl Gustav Jung, the father of analytical psychology, explored the serpent extensively as a symbol that carries a multitude of meanings, each layered with psychological significance. For Jung, the serpent embodies the shadow, the instinctual, and the transformative forces that lie beneath the conscious mind, waiting to be integrated into the whole self. Jung described the serpent as a representation of libido, not just sexual energy, but a broader life force and creative power pulsating through the unconscious. The serpent's coiled form suggests latent potential, energy waiting to be awakened, much like the Kundalini serpent of Hindu tradition. In dreams, serpents often appear at pivotal moments of inner transformation, sometimes frightening, sometimes healing, signaling a confrontation with repressed fears, desires, or wisdom. The serpent in dreams can manifest as both a threat and a guide. It may symbolize hidden fears, destructive tendencies, or the unknown aspects of the self that have been denied or suppressed. But paradoxically, it can also serve as a catalyst for healing and growth, pushing the dreamer to face these buried elements and emerge renewed. The archetype of the serpent thus embodies the dual nature of the unconscious. It holds the shadow, the unacknowledged dark, but it also contains the wisdom necessary for individuation, the process of becoming whole. For Jung, integration of the serpent archetype was essential. To deny or destroy it was to fragment the psyche, to remain trapped in partial consciousness. To embrace it, to symbolically befriend the serpent, was to undertake the alchemical work of transformation, transmuting poison into medicine, darkness into light. The serpent's shadowy presence is a reminder that healing requires facing what frightens us most, venturing into the depths of our being where chaos and order coexist. This archetypal understanding also resonates with the serpent's role as a symbol of initiation and rebirth found across cultures. The shedding of the snake's skin mirrors psychological renewal, the casting off of old identities and limiting beliefs. The coiling and uncoiling suggests the cyclical nature of growth, the spiraling path of consciousness expanding beyond linear understanding. The serpent is both the gatekeeper and the key to the inner journey. Moreover, in Jungian thought, the serpent can appear in collective dreams and myths as a reflection of societal fears and potentials. It is a figure that embodies primal energy, sometimes chaotic, sometimes creative, that cultures have struggled to interpret and contain. Its recurring presence in human storytelling suggests it touches on universal psychological themes: death and regeneration, danger and protection, unconscious wisdom and instinctual knowledge. Ultimately, the serpent as an archetype invites us to reconsider our relationship with the unknown within ourselves. It challenges the modern tendency to reject or demonize the dark, the irrational, or the instinctual. Instead, it urges a courageous encounter with these forces, recognizing that only through this integration can transformation occur. The serpent, in this psychological lens, is neither friend nor foe, but a profound symbol of the journey toward self-awareness and wholeness. In this way, the serpent becomes not just a mythic creature or a religious symbol, but a living image within the human psyche, one that continues to speak across time, calling us to face the shadows, awaken the dormant energies within, and embrace the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that defines the human experience. Throughout history and across cultures, the serpent has been a figure of contradiction, both feared and revered, maligned and celebrated. Yet beneath these conflicting portrayals lies a profound truth. The serpent is not simply good or evil, friend or foe. It is a symbol of initiation, transformation, and the alchemical reconciliation of opposites. The serpent embodies the sacred path where poison becomes medicine and death births new life. To reclaim the serpent is to move beyond simplistic moral judgments and to recognize its role as a teacher and guide. It invites us to embrace complexity, to walk the hidden path of sacred knowledge. As the ancient wisdom teaches, "Be ye therefore wise as serpents." This injunction is not a call to cunning in a negative sense, but a challenge to awaken to the deeper realities that lie beneath surface appearances. The serpent's coil reminds us that life is cyclical, always turning, always renewing. It teaches us that transformation often requires descending into darkness, confronting fear and ignorance, and surrendering old identities. But it also assures us that from these depths emerges new understanding, healing, and empowerment. The serpent is the living symbol of the inner alchemical work, where poison is transmuted into elixir, and death becomes the gateway to rebirth. In reclaiming the serpent, we reclaim a sacred archetype that carries the mystery of life itself. It connects us to ancient wisdom traditions, to the universal rhythms of nature, and to the profound inner journey toward wholeness. The serpent is a mirror reflecting the shadow and the light within us all, challenging us to embrace the totality of our being. Ultimately, the serpent calls us to awaken, to see beyond dualities, to trust the hidden currents of transformation, and to walk the path of initiation with courage and wisdom. It is a symbol of transcendence, gnosis, and the eternal dance of life and death. By embracing the serpent, we reclaim not only a lost symbol, but the deeper knowledge that lies at the heart of the human experience.